Hello, explorers. Welcome back to the Accidental Explorer.
All right, so you're here with us on the deep dive because you're the kind of person who wants to get into the weeds of a topic and really understand it.
Yeah,
But also you want to do it without wasting a bunch of time.
that's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So today we're going to be diving deep into an interesting perspective on the way Indian media covers Nagaland.
Yeah, it's
Or maybe in this case, doesn't cover it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the piece we're looking at here is called How the Indian Media is Ignoring Nagaland's Truth.
Right.
And it's pretty provocative.
Definitely. And, right off the bat, this piece asks you to think about something.
Okay.
When is the last time you saw, major national news coverage about Nagaland that wasn't about elections or some politician making a statement or, unfortunately about the insurgency there or the peace talks that never seem to go anywhere?
Right, and it's been going on for so long.
Forever, basically.
Yeah.
This piece is arguing that this isn't just a coincidence. They just didn't get around to covering Nagaland this week.
Right.
It's saying there's a pattern of silence here.
Yeah, a deliberate overlooking of what's going on there.
So it's not just a lack of stories.
Yeah.
It's more like an active choice to not shine a light on Nagaland.
And that has consequences.
Absolutely. One of the things this piece does is compare how the media reacts to events in different parts of India.
Okay.
So protests in Delhi.
Huge coverage.
Right. Huge national news.
Yeah.
But then you have protests in Nagaland.
And crickets.
Basically nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Same thing with unrest in Gujarat.
Front page news.
Everyone's talking about it. But then you have clashes with the armed forces in Nagaland.
Yeah.
Barely a whisper in the national media.
Exactly.
And the piece even brings up church burnings.
Oh, right.
Which, obviously, a horrible thing no matter where it happens. But they point out how the church burnings in Manipur got tons of attention.
Yeah, nationwide outrage.
Right. But then they talk about the silencing and desecration and control of churches in Nagaland and how that's barely even mentioned.
It really makes you think.
Yeah, it does. It makes you wonder whose stories are considered important enough to tell.
Exactly. And whose voices get amplified.
Right. And then the piece asks this very pointed question.
Okay.
Are tribal voices less Indian?
Wow.
Are Naga lives less valuable?
That's,
Really makes you stop and think.
yeah, powerful stuff.
So, if the silence is really happening, like the piece is saying, it begs the question, who benefits from it, right?
Right. Who's gaining from Nagaland being kept in the shadows?
Exactly. The piece suggests that this lack of coverage could be a way to obscure certain things.
Like what?
Well, they mention military actions, the complex negotiations that have been dragging on for years,
Yeah.
and maybe most importantly, the promises that were made to the Naga people that haven't been kept. And that's something I think a lot of people don't realize. The history there is complicated.
Yeah, very much so.
There were agreements made decades ago that are still unresolved.
Right.
So the piece argues that keeping Nagaland out of the national spotlight could be a way to avoid dealing with those uncomfortable truths.
Like I see, it's just kind of sweeping it under the rug.
In a sense, yeah. And they suggest this silence isolates the Nagas.
Makes sense.
Makes it harder for them to get support from the rest of the country.
Right. If people don't even know what's happening.
Exactly. And then they ask these two really important questions.
What are those?
Who controls the narrative? And who gains when Nagaland remains a somewhat obscure or overlooked part of the country for many?
Big questions.
Big questions, yeah.
And I think this piece makes it clear that it sees this as more than just a media issue.
Right.
It's about the identity and the dignity of the Naga people.
Absolutely. They feel like they're being ignored, forgotten.
Yeah, like their existence doesn't matter.
Right. And the piece is basically a plea to the rest of India to remember that Nagaland exists and it matters.
It's a call to action.
Yeah, for sure. They're speaking directly to journalists, editors, anchors.
Saying what?
Do your job.
Okay.
Go beyond the surface level stuff and show the real Nagaland.
The good and the bad.
Exactly. The conflicts, the efforts for peace, the culture, the history, the questions that are still unanswered.
It's a tall order.
It is, but I think it's an important one.
Definitely. And, the piece ends on this thought that I found really interesting.
Okay.
It says that feeling uncomfortable about these questions is actually a good sign.
Why is that?
Because that discomfort can be the start of awareness.
So lean into the discomfort.
Yeah, don't shy away from it.
Because that's how we start to understand things more deeply.
Exactly.
It's a powerful idea.
And it makes me think about how we choose what to pay attention to.
Right, whose stories we listen to and whose stories we ignore.
Exactly. And that brings us to the big question I think we should all be asking ourselves after reading this piece.
Okay, what's that?
In a world where we're bombarded with information constantly, how can we make sure that marginalized voices and complex realities like what's happening in Nagaland get the attention they deserve?
It's a challenge, but it's one we can't afford to ignore.